Elon Musk swiftly trying to overhaul multiple government agencies, sidelining career officials in order to advance an aggressive cost-cutting agenda. Earlier this week, our next guest co-wrote an article covering what the New York Times dubbed Musk's, quote, incursion into the federal government. Speaking about Musk, the piece says, quote, at one point after another, Trump officials have generally relented rather than try to slow him down. Some hope Congress would choose to reassert itself. So far, they are not. Joining us now to talk about Musk's approach, his power, and concerns surrounding his New York Times reporter, Teddy Schleifer. Teddy, so great to see you. And again, terrific work following the money here. It was interesting. There's been a lot of hyperbole on all sides of this, especially around USAID. And I, for one, was interested to learn that we spent $20 million on some Iraq Sesame Street show, $2 million on a Moroccan pottery class. It kind of brings me back to the mid-1980s. You wouldn't remember it, but back then there was the $640 toilet seat and the $430 hammer at Pentagon. There's always waste. If you look at AID as a whole, it's $40 billion. It's a lot of money, but it's less than 1% of the government. Do you think we're making too much of this agency, or do you think this sort of signals a bigger plan ahead for other agencies and cuts for Musk?
Yeah, a great question is, why does Elon Musk care so much about this agency? Elon is in some ways a victim of his own platform. I mean, he sees things on Twitter or on X and responds. And to some extent, it's very humanizing. And Elon has been ingesting a lot of content from right-wing media that suggests that USAID is, the rotten core of American society, or at least American foreign policy, and that's why he's focusing so much on this. Which is $40 billion, but there are a lot of agencies that have a lot more zeros attached to that. And the question you're getting at is, does this presage sort of the playbook, right? Is this an example of what's going to happen at HHS or the Pentagon or whatnot? Kind of those big ticket items to the federal government, where Musk sends in a few 25-year-olds to kind of wreak havoc.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about what legal right he has to do this, and a lot of differences. Even we had some members of Congress on today saying, well, he's not actually cutting anything. He's just making suggestions and highlighting things. What's your sense? And Musk himself has said on X that, we fed USAID into the wood chipper over the weekend. Yep. What's your sense of whether he is cutting, whether he's just making suggestions? The president of USAID is a little bit different because it's sort of an executive order. But is he actually making cuts, or is this just being overblown?
I mean, if it's being overblown, it's being overblown by Elon Musk, to be clear, not by the media.
Yeah.
There is some difference here, I think, between Trump and Elon on this question, as you'd guess. Donald Trump is the democratically elected president of the United States, and Elon Musk, Trump has described as sort of his enforcer, the person who's carrying out his executive orders on his behalf to make sure that the Trump government is following what the Trump president, or President Trump, wants him to do. Elon is portraying himself as, an executive, right? And that raises all the questions about presidential power that have been debated for decades. It's just, he's not the president, right?
Yeah.
So, there would be ample questions of whether Trump himself has the power to do these things. And then you kind of put in a surrogate, a political appointee and someone who Donald Trump has the right to name to the head of this body, but it raises, a host of other legal questions. So I don't know the answer to the legality of whether or not what Trump is doing is allowed, and we certainly don't know the answer to whether or not Elon Musk can do it.
Yeah, and it was interesting when Treasury Secretary Bessent put out the statement yesterday saying Elon Musk and Doge doesn't control the Treasury database, but that doesn't mean that they don't have it. And what's your sense of what they've done with that data? What kind of legal resource is this going to go in the courts? What do you think of these lawsuits against it? And do you think that data has actually been downloaded onto a private server, or do we even know?
Well, I think the most interesting word in that letter from Scott Bessent from Treasury, not from Scott Bessent himself, last night, was the word currently. They said there that currently only Treasury officials have access, or have read-only access to the payment system. I don't know. I have no idea if that means anything, but it certainly stood out to me. It made me wonder, has that always been the case over the last week? And they've said we don't have no evidence to say that Elon Musk has downloaded that information to a private server. Certainly, there's a ton of speculation and conspiracy theorying and hypothesizing. But I think this is all coming into a vacuum because the Musk team and the Trump administration has not been honest about, or has not been transparent about what exactly has been going on here. There have been some conflicting reporting about whether or not the read-only thing is true, whether it's always been true. We report here at the Times that the White House has said on record, which I think is important in this day and age, that it is read-only. And they've said that it is Doge officials. This is a guy named Tom Krause, who's the Silicon Valley CEO, who is the Treasury, one of the lead Doge people to Treasury, who has that power. But certainly, I think we're just getting started here on answering these questions because, certainly a lot of market investors want to know whether or not, the Elon team has the ability to stop a dollar from going out of the U.S. government.
Yeah, and it sounds like his next target is the IRS, which also is under Treasury. He put out a poll on X saying, should we audit the IRS? Given the sensitivity of the Republicans toward what they said the Democrats did with IRS data, leaking all the billionaire information, what's your sense of whether he could get access to IRS data? And what's the chatter in D.C. right now about what he wants to do with the IRS?
Sure. I mean, this is the guy who said he's made the largest tax payment in history. Suddenly, just seems to be interested in the IRS. We reported here at the Times that the Elon team for almost the entire transition has been thinking very, very creatively or interested. They're very interested, let's put it that way, in the IRS infrastructure. There's a guy, an Elon advisor named Barish Akis, who had met with IRS officials during the transition and was asking a lot of pointed questions about the way it works. I mean, there certainly are a lot of experts on all sides who think that the IRS infrastructure is very outdated, and frankly, auditing the IRS.
He should help them with their technology. That's what he should be doing. He should help them with better technology, more efficiency, and more enforcement and more collection.
I mean, look, auditing the IRS has been something, as you know, that has been a talking point in conservative policy for a long time, and frankly, I think a lot of presidents would look into that if you were a Republican. But I think the Elon involvement is interesting to me as a reporter who covers him, is because this is somebody who has enormously biased opinions about taxes. I'm not saying biased in a negative way, but is there anybody in America who would care more about some of the specifics about, wealth taxes or carried interest or, tax credits for companies like Tesla? The conflicts of interest here are so obvious, it's almost not worth talking about.